I've never seen an ARG capture the internet quite in this way, especially one covering such a twisted subject. The word twisted here has two meanings. Yes, the subject matter is very, very dark, and I'll take this time to throw up a disclaimer about these things now, but also in the way that it was told. An ARG has a way of storytelling through puzzles. The surface level has one story, but there is another buried underneath. Petscop has one of the most literal interpretations of this concept, but even then we haven't scratched the surface. Due to the complicated nature of the series of late, and how confusing it might be for those of you who have never heard of the series or want a refresher, I'm going to be covering 5 videos per part in the series, so everything is in manageable chunks as much as it can be. This one is going through episode 1 to 5, and I'm going to avoid mentioning anything after that as much as I can, unless I need to. All for the sake of clarity. After going through these videos, we'll look at the theories and random tidbits and go from there. Our very first taste of the series was uploaded on the 12th of March 2017. 2 years ago. The description says, "The game I found," and a note that we'll come back to. The note was originally an annotation on the video itself, but since annotations have been axed by YouTube, it's transferred to the description. The category of all of these videos will be in people and blogs. I'm not going to attribute this to anything because I feel like reading too much into the series is part of the reason that so many people get confused, but I do feel it's kind of weird. Most gameplay and lost media type of videos are listed as entertainment or gaming or something, not really in this category. It opens with the standard PlayStation 1 screen that you all know, however this time the screen glitches towards the end, gears us up in a subtle way for things being unfinished in some way. We get the Garalina company logo, but the chords are very dissonant and it too just seems like it wasn't quite finished in a way that a product would be. When we get to the game's splash screen and menus, Paul, our Let's Player, never outright states his name, but we do get it from the save file. We have the standard options, but the go back option is freaking out much more than the others, not in the way that it's being hovered on, but at a constant rate. Paul also addresses people in the video saying "you" so we know it's made for someone else besides himself. And with the rest of the videos out, we know that he's apparently talking to someone specifically that he knows, like a friend or family member that he's recording this for, rather than a general YouTube audience.
Alright, so this is just to prove to you that I'm not lying about this game that I found. I'm just gonna walk you through everything that I've seen so far, and obviously it'll be exactly as I described it because this is it.
He isn't doing anything the usual modern YouTuber does, which almost gives an air of an older YouTuber or just something that's slightly isolated compared to the rest of the website. The loading screen has a present box on a pedestal and is fairly short for this kind of game. We then see an area that is called the gift plane, and we are told the following as an intro to the game we're about to play. The gift plane has closed indefinitely, and all personnel have left. If you're unaware, the gift plane provided homes to over 100 young pets. Unfortunately, we have failed to remove all of the pets from their homes. 48 remain here, at the time of writing. We would strongly encourage you to visit our 8 homes and find some friends to take with you. Every pet is uniquely valuable. You should have no problem in finding somebody that you love. The gift plane staff. The numbers in the dialogue are emphasized and also freak out like the go back button did. Paul goes to the far right and we can see how unfinished the game is, how it is empty. The only finished level of the game is Even Care, where Paul goes next. The name Even Care has been discussed a lot and a lot of people think it refers to "do you even care" or in phrases like that. The first thing we see in Even Care is a poster of a bird with a broken leg and a flower next to it. The bird is Toneth, written in red, and the flower is Randus, written in green. You'll notice that certain words and names have color emphasis on it, and a lot of people think that there's a meaning to which color is used for what because it indicates which character is speaking, so I'll be mentioning the colors as I find them. The door down the hallway cannot be opened by Paul's character, and the game acknowledges that Paul's character doesn't know how to open doors, basically indirectly acknowledging the fact that his character does not have arms. We then find a sign in the next room that says, "When you're choosing a pet, find somebody that you like. You don't have to love them right away. Don't be discouraged if they run from you, they really do want a home. They're afraid. Show them that there's nothing to be afraid of. The way the game uses the terms pets or somebody interchangeably, like the pets are people, it's definitely weird. Paul then goes to find Amber, the first pet in the game, and talks through his process of figuring out the puzzle to get her caught.
Let her out of her cage and she just moves to the other one. And then you do that. Take the money here. And then actually you go over here and she just does that. But if you do this, if you lock yourself in here, then you just... Amber will just run over there. So
there's a trophy for her being so good about staying in her cage, and she certainly looks happy in it, as restrictive as it might seem. He opens the cage and she jumps into the other one, and he has to lock himself into her original cage to trick her into jumping back into it so he can catch her. Right off the bat, this game is showing us we have to trick these pets into coming with us, because they don't really want to leave their homes. Paul opens up the menu and shows Amber's description. Amber is young bull. She's afraid to leave home. If her home is good, that is not a problem. She is very heavy, and that makes her life a little harder, as well as yours. What's the safest place that you can put her in? You should start thinking about that. We also see all of the other empty spots that still have an outline of which pet belongs there, and those silhouettes in each save file is how it's supposed to look, until they're filled with their name and description. The names are also written in messy, childlike handwriting. This isn't the last time we will see this handwriting. A couple of rooms down we find Ronith, a name that seems to be a combo of Tonith and Randis. Initially I thought that the design was also a combo of a bird and a flower, but looking closer it doesn't really look like a flower stem. This looks like something else. If anything, this is part Tonith and part something else entirely. Paul can't seem to catch them because they float out of his reach when he tries. He says he couldn't figure out how, and then goes into a room with a piano and treadmill with numbers on the top.
This one. I've tried. This is always what happens. So I don't know what's up with that one.
He basically explains how he figured out the solution to the puzzle with this pet, Pen, and he doesn't really know how the puzzle worked, so he brute forced it. The interesting thing about Pen is that they're completely deaf. They don't know anything about music, and they want to concentrate on math. So why are they in a room with a piano puzzle? In another room we have a Cloud, Wavy, and Randis the flower. They keep moving away from you from spot to spot in the same way that Amber did, so this time you have to place a bucket over one of the spots, so when they get there they'll be trapped. How it works is Wavy needs to be pouring water on Randis for Randis to live. So when Wavy is forced to pour water onto the bucket instead, Randis shrivels and you catch both of them. An interesting thing about this part is the theory of this being a representation of codependency. Both of these characters need each other, and when they're deprived of one another, they can't function. Paul then says he's caught all of the pets you can see in the game so far, but he has a note that came with the game that he finds interesting. This is also the note written in the description. It's a weird mishmash between someone talking about their website and cheats in the game, and in a very customer servicey tone, with directly in the middle a mess of capital letters hurriedly talking about a shadow monster man and how that was achieved in the game. These two blocks of text have very different ways of speaking. Paul then performs the actions where it tells him to.
With this, which is short, the first line in all capital letters, I'm gonna read it. It says, I walked downstairs, and when I got to the bottom, instead of proceeding, I turned the right and became a shadow monster man. Below that, a date, June 13th, 1997. For you, colon. Please go to my website on the sticker, and also go to Ronith's room, and press start, and press down, 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 right, start. So I happen to know that this is Ronith's room, because it works, so I go here. I'm just gonna do this now. So what is it? Down, 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 right, start. Alright? So you can see that it accepted it, and the music stopped. I'm just gonna go out this way here.
Note, even though there is a website mentioned, he never shows us what it is or what it's called. We still don't know what it is. I'll also take this moment to say there is no official website officially associated with Petscop or the creators of Petscop as we know right now. Everything is contained within this channel, so if you find something like a website or a supposed copy of the game that people are trying to direct you to outside of the channel itself, please do not think it's real. I think I heard something once of someone trying to have like a website up and there was something malicious on it, or someone trying to cash in on the series themselves. I'm not sure how many times that must have happened, but with a series like this and how popular it's gotten, that sort of stuff is bound to happen all the time. If there is something we need to see outside of the channel, the creators will tell you in a video on the channel. It seems like they would be very direct with that sort of thing, especially with the way that people can capitalize on stuff like this without being associated with the creators, so make sure that you go to places that are more official. After performing the actions on the note, Paul explains that he can tell something happened because the music stopped, and he knows that something else is out there for him to find and he has to go and find it. There's a cut as he leaves the gift plane and we're treated to a now black loading screen. The screen is one of the first to actually contain an image hidden, and it needs to be brightened in editing to uncover it. In this we see a distorted kind of face. But then we're thrust into this world where there is no music at all. The sky is complete black, the only light is really coming from this aura around Paul's character, and there is nothing but dreary grass forever. Paul explains how he wandered around here for like an hour or more and found nothing, and yet all of a sudden there's a hatch he cannot open. This is where the first video ends. An important thing to note is that Paul has played some of this before he started recording. You can tell by the way that he's going through the motions of it to simply show what he found. However, after Petscop 1, we're basically all in new territory. Everything he finds is framed in the way that is all new to him, and the recordings are meant to be the first time that he's seen any of the surprises that await him.
Can open the door, but I don't know what to do. So I thought I would just slip this in at the end. If you think you saw something that might provide a clue, please let me know. Alright, that's it.
Upload date of the 1st of April 2017. There's nothing written in the description. Apparently while Paul was off doing something else, the hatch had opened by itself for a seemingly no reason, with a weird audio tone that seems to have no reason either.
Hey, so, the door opened on its own. I was just in the other room for a couple of minutes, and I came back and the door was open, and I checked the recording, because I was recording, and the door just opens on its own. I didn't do anything. So, I'll take it, right? So I'm gonna show you what's in here now. I haven't seen it yet, so, this could be interesting.
This time the loading screen is what seems to be a series of random blocks and images, but I think they're apparently maps of rooms, like top-down layouts, that are very compressed. We then get into a room with a vibrating machine of some kind, but we don't know what it is or why it's there because it either has no features or the features are entirely hidden in the silhouette. The darkness is still very much present, and we also get collectibles. I'm going to be calling them pieces for the rest of the series for clarity's sake. And this in itself is weird because this is apparently an unfinished part of the game, and yet we already have these things everywhere. You might be thinking, well, they just had time to put the pieces in, but they didn't have time to put anything else there. I tried looking up when to add collectibles in your game. I didn't get an exact answer, but the stuff that I read was kind of implying that you'd already done everything else. It gives me the idea that you're supposed to have most of the level done before you do it, and this seems far too early. It's almost like the game was intended to be found this way. At least by the person who is playing it. In another room there is a loud phone ringing, and when Paul answers it, it simply says Care has left the room, with Care being written in yellow. Remember in the beginning of the game we saw a room called Even Care, accompanied by a lot of flower imagery. Now we have a character called Care and there's a bulletin board with a picture on it. It has 3 versions of the same person, Care A, which looks normal, Care B, which looks a bit disheveled, and NLM, who has her hands covering her face and is quite upset. Paul then finds a curious hallway that has a straight drop down the side, honestly making it look more unfinished than the other areas. We find a number of pictures here, a greenhouse, a brick building that when I first saw this I thought was a council house or some sort of apartment building, but is later revealed to be the school, and a windmill. Also, we get this quite jarring audio when the school is shown, which we have never gotten before. The only thing that we've gotten that sounds this ominous was the sound when the hatch opened, and that was honestly completely different. This is as close as we get so far to a jump scare in the series. Although this is an audio cue, we can conclude that it shows an emphasis on something very bad that has happened or will happen in the building that makes it stick out. Paul then finds a road with a dead end, and there are some pieces in there. He goes outside the building, and then a black loading screen is shown again. When he exits the building, we find another black loading screen with a stairway going down, 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 and a door to the right. Paul then apologizes for the lack of commentary, but it's pretty easy to see that he is very confused with all of these things, and anyone would fall silent when trying to process it all. Then we find some sort of backyard, with the most notable things being the faces on the shed, and what looks like a headstone with a present box on it. It is a headstone for a 7-year-old child called Michael Hammond, who was apparently a gift.
This is a little more than I was expecting to see. That's a dead kid.
Good observation skills there, Paul. How'd you guess that one? In the shed there's a giant daisy, and Paul figures out he can pull off the petals. Reminiscent of loves me not type of pattern, complete with the screen going red with an odd audio cue every second a petal pulled. Paul stops when there are 3 petals left and goes outside, finding the character that looks a lot like Care, specifically Care NLM. When Paul goes back to pull the remaining 3 petals, he finds a glitchy mess. Keep that in mind with what we said about even Care. There's a lot of flower imagery around Care, which you'll see later on as well. With everything that we've deduced so far, we can tell that it ended on loves me not. Paul just clips through her when he tries to interact. And he is naturally really confused about this. He also then discovers a secret passage and finds a room with the drawings of a blue thing. Paul, a bit later on, meets the same thing, which is red instead of blue. Paul is then given a question prompt and he types what, which is unintentionally funny to me. And the thing replies, I don't know, with something that looks very similar to the handwriting in the pets menu. Paul goes to look outside and sees a windmill we saw in the picture. The thing says, keep watching the windmill. And we get our second appearance of the disturbing audio cue that is unlike any other thing in the game. 2 tones of it to be precise. Paul then explains that he had been standing there for like 2 minutes now and nothing had happened, so he decides to just call it quits, walking out to see more of the outside.
Oh. Alright, so it's been like 2 minutes, and when those sounds were playing, there was nothing happening as far as I could tell, and nothing has happened since, so I'm just gonna keep going.
I don't know if this is just me having issues with the video, but it looks like his character's footsteps are very, very disconnected from the footstep sound, to the point where I can hear grass sounds when he's on the hard floor, and then the footsteps just don't even match his movements in the first place. There are pauses where there shouldn't be, and then he just keeps running and there's silence for a bit. It's weird. This is also when Paul mentions his friend coming home this month, and we have an idea of what type of audience he's speaking to, at least a little bit.
But also, when you come home next month, and hopefully you're feeling a little more enthusiastic about that now, we can investigate this together. And maybe you'll find stuff that I can't find here.
After some narrow walkways, we find a room that is very pink, and seems to say Quitter's room in a reflected backwards kind of way, like it's being reflected from a mirror. We see the same face from the loading screen that we saw earlier, on a body that looks just like Paul's character, and it moves exactly as we do. Paul walks behind a shelf and we get an audio cue. When we come back, the Quitter character is delayed and making an entirely different set of movements in some cases. almost like they're distracted, before it then goes back to a complete copy. Paul then finds a more reflected text saying, "Do you remember being born?" in child's writing.
Oh. What the fuck? Wait a second. What was that just now?
Paul leaves the room and we're suddenly out by the hatch again, but the door that we came from is now facing away from us, and this is where the episode ends. What's interesting in this scenario is that we're the one who is reflected on the wrong side of the mirror. I just found that interesting because it seems like with these stories, the other thing or the unknown thing is on the reflected side and we're given the clearer, corrected side to figure things out. For whatever reason, the game is trying to communicate that we're the one who is intruding.
Well, okay, I'm not gonna do that right now. Alright, so I'm gonna stop this now, actually.
Uploaded on the 2nd of April, it has no description. Paul walks past a huge lettering spelling out "Good Grief and Alas" in all caps. Now is a good time to mention the Dr. Seuss book, Daisy Head Maisie, which a lot of you were probably waiting for me to mention for a while now if you've seen the series. In this book we have the phrase "good grief and alas," and we also have a lot more context about the whole Daisy thing. The story is about a girl who finds that she has a daisy growing out of her head one morning, and she gets super upset and isolates herself because everyone will think she's a freak. She keeps saying nobody loves me, until she tries the love me not petal pulling pattern on the daisy on her head, and she finds out that they do in fact love her, and everything is fine again. It has a happy ending. There's even a part where she puts her hands over her face and cries in a similar way to Care and Alem, or Care Nobody Loves Me. The most important thing here is that Maisie has a happy life at the end of the book. People love her, but when we pluck the daisy petals for Care, this doesn't seem to happen. It seems to actively hurt her. Even the cue that we get at the end seems to be something very harsh, like it would hurt someone. Paul finds a box that looks like a library return slot, and it says that he should place something inside it. Inside the building, he finds an easel with the option to change the nose, eyebrows, and eyes in a type of puzzle. He brute forces the puzzle, and it seems to violently shake the building, and we can see through the door that the room is actually acting as an elevator.
Or I have to put something in there. Yeah, it turned out I just had to wait, but I had to wait a while. So this is cleared out, I guess. So what's in here?
There's now a child's bedroom with a desk with a truck on an 8-ball on it, and on the bed there's a child sitting. There are game controllers, and I think those are bear patterns on the carpet. Paul tries this combination of faces multiple times and concludes that these must be randomly generated rooms for children. Each of these have different patterns on the carpet, colors, and different objects on the desks. As far as I know, these randomly generated ones don't really have much significance outside of just showing us what the room does. However, Paul then remembers the faces that he saw on the headstone and the shed area. The headstone one, Mike's, says, "Mike is not inside right now. He is dead. You may visit his room." This room has only one item on the table, a red object, which I'm going to call tool because it's easier. And there is no child on the bed, as you would have thought. When Paul inputs the face on the shed, we get Care is missing, and in her room we see crayons and the same red tool on the desk, and the flower patterns on the carpet. We also find a note about how Care is apparently not growing eyebrows, and we also find the familiar yellow text with Care's name. We also see green text, similar to Randus but not quite the same. And we get the first mention of Tiara in purple text, similar to the purple in the numbers that we saw in the beginning and the note on the quitter's room. Your wife says Care isn't growing eyebrows. You say, that's a puzzle. You're secretly very excited to hear this news. You're in the bathtub, thinking about her. I have a guess at which child you pick next. When you find her room, the passage to my right will lead to her. She'll appear from the darkness limping, and I'll shoot her in the head. Tiara says young people can be psychologically damaged beyond rebirthing. A young person walks into your school building. They walk in with you, you're holding their hands. They come out crying into their hands because nobody will love them. Not ever again. Nobody loves me. They wandered the Newmaker plane. So what we can gather from this is that the green text is a person responsible for some really weird feelings and events involving children, which does not sound too good. The passage to my right also makes me think of the mysterious staircase picture that we saw earlier, and with the note in the game about the shadow monster man. Shooting her in the head, oddly enough, makes me think of a mercy killing, because something has happened to this kid that should not have happened, like with the phrase rebirthing being some sort of amalgamation and imbalance that should not exist. The phrase "kill it with fire" is used a lot in a joking fashion, but coming back to what it actually means, it's something that should not exist, something that is entirely wrong with the fabric of reality itself. It makes me think of weird science experiments or like a weird magical rituals that result in something that should not have been done because it's not really possible, and the thing that comes out of it is a threat to life itself. Also with the Newmaker plane, if even care is a heavenly place, then this plane looks a lot like a purgatory. Paul talks about this and mentions this part of the game was clearly made for someone to see. I agree.
I'm wondering now. Because the note, remember the note that came with this game? It said, "For you." It was "For you." And this note is referring to the player. It's saying "you." And I was already thinking this, but it seems like it's possible. This game was made for, well, this part of the game was made for somebody to see.
He finds an empty room and the episode ends. Uploaded on the 7th of April with no description, there's a camera next to a platform that is vibrating from side to side unsteadily. The windmill is gone. Paul mentions this as if he has spoken about it before offline to someone and then goes to record it for them. If he was talking to a YouTube audience, he would have had to recap the entire thing because we wouldn't be able to hear what he was saying offline. So this is kind of cementing the idea that this was for someone in particular and not for all of us. There is also someone watching in the top corner, but they vanish very quickly.
But yeah, I think my understanding is correct. It's just, I'm missing something. Okay, that's it.
This is the last episode that we'll be talking about in this video. It was uploaded on the 11th of April and says, "I guess this is for all of you now." This is interesting because at first glance it seems like he does acknowledge the idea that there are, the public who is watching this, but at the same time I don't really believe that. To me it seems like there might be some people that he knows along with his friend that he is now showing all together instead of just showing some randos on the internet. We also see the use of "we", which is odd. The way that I use "we" is when I talk about these videos like I have been doing so far, is kind of acknowledging and guiding along everyone who's watching it with me when I point out stuff. It kind of feels like we're watching it together, like saying "we then see a windmill" or something like that, but if I'm talking about stuff that is just making sense to me, or I'm talking about my own perspective like I am right now, I don't use the word "we". You can see where I'm going with this, I hope. So this video is primarily Paul going to the red tool and asking a bunch of questions. The other part of the description is just all the other questions that they asked and didn't get proper answers to. The stock answer just seems to be "I don't know." The ones that we do get the answers to are the following. Who is Tiara? Petscop kid, very smart. Who am I? Newmaker. Where am I? Under the Newmaker plane. It then goes bright pink and says turn off PlayStation. When asked why, it says Marvin picks up tool, hurts me when PlayStation on. It then changes back to normal. Paul asks what it is and it says tool and shows a picture of itself. When asked remember being born, it says I'm not Tiara, and this is where the video and our video analysis for now ends. We are obviously left with a lot of questions, and even when I said that this is the least complicated part of the series, it's still pretty fucking complicated. The one thing that I haven't mentioned so far, and that you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned, is Candace Newmaker. I was saving this for the very end because there's some stuff that I wanted to say about it. So there was a girl called ProcrastiTara Elmore, and her siblings Michael and Chelsea lived in Evergreen, Colorado. They were placed in foster care when she was 5. She was bounced around the system and then adopted by someone with the name Newmaker. Candace was renamed Candace Elizabeth Newmaker, and apparently had a lot of trouble adjusting. She would hit or abuse other kids, act out, and generally do a lot of things that someone who was deeply troubled and looking for attention to cry out for help would do. Instead of taking Candace to a proper child therapist or actually giving her proper health care, Miss Newmaker takes her to these quacks who hold her down with a heavy blanket and a total of 675 pounds of 4 adults sitting on her body, telling her to try and crawl her way out of this suffocating situation to simulate being born. Complete with insulting and humiliating her and calling her a quitter repeatedly, telling her that she would die for real and making fun of her as she starts to vomit and defecate out of her body being deprived of oxygen, her panic, and just generally being trapped in this horrible, horrible situation. And so naturally when she passes out and stops responding, according to the official transcript of the event, the nurses say, "Let's talk to the twerp," before mocking her and making fun of her sleeping in her own vomit. She wasn't sleeping though. Her brain had shut down and she later died. Reminded that this all really happened, and it makes me incredibly angry. The important thing about mentioning this is that people think that this ties to the series. The reason why is because of the name Newmaker, and I think that when people originally looked up the word Newmaker, this was one of the first things that they found, and because there weren't that many other results that weren't just tied to Petscop itself, it seemed to be like the word was directly pulled from the name Newmaker. And there's also the name Tiara, which responds to Tiara Elmore. There's Michael, there's talk of rebirth, there's talk of being born, and the general attitude of child abuse and treating children like things or pets rather than actual human beings is something that people like to tie into the actual story of Candace Newmaker. The biggest criticism to this theory is that the game was apparently made in 1997, and yet Candace died in 2000, so how would this work? Daisy Head Maisie works because it had come out way before the game would have come out, so it makes sense to have it as something that's related as a clue. However, while I'm not exactly fully on board with the Candace Newmaker thing, here's my perspective on it. I don't think that this game revolves around Candace, and she isn't a part of the story in a direct or actual way, but neither is Maisie. If you look at it, they are both devices used for the storytelling, to give you clues to talk about the story that is actually happening in the game. So the audience can research the references and get the context using these examples. Now, with that being said, obviously, the whole thing about the time periods not matching up is something that is still a big issue, even with what I've said. And I agree, the game has so much attention to detail to make it look as much like a PS1 game as possible that it doesn't make sense to just have an error like this. However, here's my defense. There is a development later in the series where Paul states that his mum had apparently owned the game in 2004. And then in the later episodes that were uploaded around Easter this year, Easter 2019, we see people playing it in different testing phases. In different phases of testing where there are a bunch of changes being made to it as people play test to see what bugs there were and stuff like that. So if there really is something weird in the game, or the game has a mind of its own, or someone fucked around with it, that means that someone probably had the ability to tamper with it in a way that added the examples of Candace, added something that was not around in 1997 but around in 2000 if that person was tampering with the game in 2000, before Paul got it. Paul only found the game like 20 years after it was made, so there was plenty of time for someone to further put in things that would help him understand the context. Again, this is me just kind of playing devil's advocate for why it would be in the game. Petscop has shown that it uses references and stuff to indirectly tell the story, while not directly including these things in the story. It's a vehicle to get there. I do think that it was included to help us understand why rebirthing in the series is a bad thing, what it means, even if Candace herself is not mentioned. So that's where I stand with it. Even if something in this series sounds like a red herring, it still gives context and information to some degree, so it should be included as a note, as a side note, even if it's something that isn't directly needed. Finally, something that I will mention before ending this part is the changes to the channel description. The profile picture has changed from Paul's character to blank, and then to what looks like nothing, and we also have a couple changes in the channel description itself. At first it was completely blank, but then on June 24, 2017, the previously blank channel description was changed to the following. Raina gave this gift to us on Christmas 1997 and 2000. It was the single longest day of our lives. We were all certain that he was dead at this time. He had been missing since June 1997 and 2000. We are not concerned about these things now. Please enjoy the recordings. We do. I'm going to mention some of the other channel descriptions as we go further along, so they'll be in the next part. But just keep it in mind, shit like this happens a lot in the series, so take notes. Anyways, I hope this video wasn't too long and I hope you enjoyed the way the subject is being tackled here. I've been loving the series since it came out and tried to talk about it a number of ways before I actually felt like I made something that I was happy with, like this one. So I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm not gonna come out with every single part consecutively, it's going to be between other videos, but I do really want to talk about this series, so I am going to make Petscop 2, unlike some people. It won't be too long to wait for the next one. Hopefully.